Hello, beautiful, and welcome to the Moms Talks Sex podcast. I'm your host, Maura Yelvington of Morph Transform Your Reality, where I help women step out of trauma and reclaim their power. I'm so happy to have you here for this open conversation about moms, sex, motherhood, children, relationships, marriage, and everything in between. So grab your drink of choice and let's dive in.
I have the most beautiful guest, Nilzara. I hope I said that okay.
Yeah, you did.
I'm so honored to have you here because I'm really excited for this conversation. I think it's really going to open a lot of women's eyes and shed some more light and information on a topic that a lot of us don't really talk about, we don't really dive into. So welcome and hi, how are you doing?
Good. I'm so excited to be here. This is such a topic that needs to be talked about for sure. So let's, I just hope that whatever needs to be said, whatever your listeners need to hear comes out today in support of them. So yeah.
Yes, me too. And I'm sure it will. So how about you introduce yourself a little bit and just tell us a little bit about your story and what you've been through.
So I am an intimate partner violence recovery coach. So I hold a space for women who are finding difficulties and finding themselves after abuse. I help them reclaim their mind, heart, and cookie through a spiritual journey. So yes, cookie is their vaginas as well. And there are a ton of dynamics that got me to this place. But one of the biggest impacts that I had was the relationship I had with my dad. So all of the craze and the distortion and like how I viewed love kind of stemmed from there. And then it branched out into all this wildness that I experienced in my life. And so I was a daddy's girl. And then when my parents divorced, I saw this other version of my dad and I was like, who in the hell is this? He became an addict. And so I left the role as a daughter and I became a mother. So as time went by, I realized that all of these crazy relationships I was in, I was being a mother to all of these men and they all had mom issues. And so, of course I have a skewed view of love, and in that caused a lot of dysfunction within the relationship. And so you and I have kind of briefly talked about all of the trauma and the crazy things that I've endured in that. But some of the big things when it comes to like sex and those things is I saw, first of all, I'm Hispanic. So sex is only for your husband. You wait to have sex until you're married. And then your body is no longer yours. It is your husband's body. And then I have the religious aspect of that too, where my family wasn't really connected to God. They were just religious in the sense of like those two things were the same thing, So there was a ton of guilt and shame around it anyways. And then I step into these relationships, and a lot of the driving force behind me doing what I was doing is, first I felt guilty. So I'm having sex with these guys, but if I can just make it work and we end up getting married, at least I can say I was just with them, But in the craziness of me being the mother and all of this and not taking care of me and taking care of these men, I learned to use sex kind of like as a manipulative tactic in a sense of safety, right? Of a skewed type of safety. If I can get it in with these guys tonight, or if I could do a circus act and flip and do all the great things, right? Then I know that he's not screwing somebody else. And then I know that he's going to be here with me tonight. And I know that in the midst of this, I'm not getting my ass beat. So I used this as a tool. And that is why one of the reasons why I help women reclaim their cookie, because you don't have to sacrifice the deepest parts of you in order to sustain a healthy relationship. Those, your mind, heart, and your cookie don't need to be sacrificed to sustain something where both parties are reciprocating, you know. But in the dysfunction with my dad and taking care of him, I only saw that sacrificing myself and in all ways is the way that you sustain a relationship. And so that's what I was doing. And in that, you know, I've been married, you know, 3 times. And in those marriages, I just thought the day I said I do is the day that I given consent. So they took whatever they wanted when they wanted, and I wasn't really a part of that equation. You know, I was doing things I didn't want to do. And even if even if sex was painful for me, I stuck it through. I totally disconnected from my body because that's what I'm supposed to do as a good wife or as a girlfriend, or to try to sustain whatever. So it wasn't until after my second marriage where I was just like, I can't live this life anymore. The abuse might look different, and of course the faces, right, of the men that are doing this to me, but the end result of how I felt, that emptiness, the I'm not worthy enough, the I can't sacrifice myself anymore, I can't love these guys into loving me anymore. So I had to come to Jesus moment and was like, hey God, to humbly accept the fact that I am the common denominator in all of this craziness happening to me. And not that I deserved what was happening to me, but my unhealed wounds were not allowing me to see healthiness. Like when we live in red flag city, right? When you live with an alcoholic parent or an unhealthy, toxic parent or whatever, your red flags, you live in it. So you're comfortable with red flags, you know. I had to have things like on fire, burnt to a crisp to be like, huh, I think something's wrong here, you know? So that's when my healing journey started, was after my second marriage. And I really had to like sit in my shit and really just hash it out, feel all the things. I learned that my thoughts, feelings, and emotions are actually there to help me maneuver through life rather than like shoving them down, you know? So it was a big deal, but that's how all of this started.
I love what you're saying, because it's so true, right? When we're in it, we're not even aware that we're in it. And then we're finally like, oh, maybe something here is, you know, I need to look at it. I need to heal it. Something is not working for me. So where are you now, right?
Yes. So now I am married with my third husband. And the cool part is that I love about this is that we've both been married 3 times. So he's had his share of craziness. I've had my share of craziness, but we both, when we started talking, okay, so let's pause and rewind. I met my husband like a million years ago in Walmart. He threw a football at me and my friends. And I was like, who's this loser? Like, who does that? You know what I mean? So anyways, we ended up partying that night. He was in the military. And so he was in my town for a short time. And then we kind of just, you know, lost touch or whatever. And he found me again 5 years ago. It'll be 5 years that we've been married in September, which is the longest I've ever been with anybody. Because, you know, I didn't know how to be single for the longest time. But he has also had his craziness. And when we came back together, we were both trying to figure out things. We had both just left our exes and we're both in counseling, both trying to figure out our relationships with God and kind of what that looked like. We were both already doing our own work. And so I think that's where we really connected, is like, I don't have to tell him to go and do this, you know, and he doesn't have to tell me to go and do this because we're already doing it. And so we reconnected, I think 2018 in April, and we were married by September. So that part of me hadn't changed yet, where I just kind of hop into stuff, but we were far away from each other. So Nevada and he was here in Virginia. And so there was no, our time together was legitimately conversation, which was different for me. So God knew what he was doing. He's like, my girl, she still needs some help. So we're going to make sure they're in different states, separate them a little bit. But we've been together, and this is by far the most healthiest relationship. And it's wild because sometimes I don't know what I'm doing. No one talks about that part. Like, we get out of the craziness, and now what do we do, right? We get into a healthy relationship, and it's like sabotage central for both of us. So we're just learning how to communicate, keeping each other in check, and knowing that we're doing it in a place of not control, but we're doing it in a place of like, we both know that we have like a hot mess side to us, and sometimes they come out a little bit, and we have to be like, hey, she's here. Like, sorry, So it's been awesome. And we have a little one. We have been working diligently, very hard to have him through IVF and all the things, but he is 8 months. My husband also has a 19-year-old daughter who is special needs. So that has been that's a whole different story. That's been pretty wild too. But yeah, so life is good. Like I said, this is the longest relationship. 5 years is like a big deal to me. So I'm like, babe, look, we've done it, because they say the first 5 years is like the hardest. And I'm like, woohoo, we're here. And we're like, good. We're like best friends. So
I'm curious, how did you get to this point, right? Because I love it for you. I love that you went from abuse and heartache and divorces, and now you're in this happy relationship, marriage with a baby. So what was that process, right? Like, how, I know you said you had this aha moment, but then what brought you here to this point, to this time, to actually doing this work with other women? Like, what was that journey like? So maybe our listeners can have a little bit, because I feel you give a lot of hope, right? You're giving a lot of hope to women that maybe are stuck in these abusive relationships or marriages. They know that they've been through some stuff in their childhood, and maybe this conversation is bringing awareness to that. So what did you do? What steps did you take to get you to where you are right now?
yeah, so the biggest thing was, of course, the realization, accepting the fact that I needed healing, to release the expectations of what that looked like, felt like, the amount of time, all of that, and really connecting with a good trauma counselor. I've had a couple of coaches that really kind of just allowed me the space to be able to share what I was experiencing. I knew what I was experiencing was crazy, but I didn't know how crazy it was until I had somebody to sit down and talk to about it and really explain what I was going through, and then hear myself talking like, what the hell? Like, this is crazy. So I'm still in therapy. I go every other week. And it is something that when I decided to take that journey of healing, I just wasn't healing for my ex-husband. I was healing from the other ex-husband and all the other things, and my dad and the rape and the blah, 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 and all the other things that were happening. So this journey, I want to really stress how important it is, like I said, to release the expectations of healing. It's like a commitment, a lifelong commitment, and unlayering, and really just being open. And part of my process too was kind of deconstructing from religion, because a lot of my abuse came from religion. Like, I was with guys that were leadership in the church, and they ended up being wild, and so I still love God, Jesus is my homie, all those things, but I've really had to unlayer those things. So that was also a part of the process for me, was like, I felt God calling me. I know that he opened the doors for me to leave my ex-husband. I know he did these things, but I just didn't want anything to do with him. So part of my healing was also the unlayering of those religious views. And in that, really, that's where I really discovered myself. It's not that I was like finding this version of me that was out there. It was like unlayering and talking about the things that had happened to me and understanding my thoughts, feelings, and my emotions, and not shoving them down, and being okay with being a hot mess for a really freaking long time, and And in that, I was able to discover who I was and become okay with being in pain and being in the hurt and those types of things, and actually being empowered by it. So it just takes time. I wish I had like a wand, ta-da, but that doesn't happen. And knowing too that different healing modalities come in different seasons. So, counseling, I've had a couple different counselors, but different types of counseling, and then also done Reiki, energy type stuff, healing, meditation, all of those things played a huge part in my healing process. And one is not greater than the other. They're all super important. And to know that this season, this is what I need for here. This season, I need to heal the sister wound. This season, I need to heal this part of me. And one thing I do want to add is I had a holistic doctor I was working with my IVF process. And this is where I knew I needed to help women reclaim their cookie, because I was so disconnected with her. She said, Nilzara, she's like, if your vagina had a voice, if she had a voice, what would she be telling you right now? And I was like, excuse you, who are you to ask me this question right now? Because I was so upset of not being able to get pregnant and not to be able to do these things. And that's when I was like, wow. And I just cried. I'm like, she's upset with me. I haven't listened to her, in so long. I've been so disconnected from her. So reclaiming all those parts of me. For sure. So there's a lot. This has been years. I hope that answered your question.
You answered it beautifully, because yes, this is exactly what I talk about. I actually call this the diamond status in my program. It's a mind, body, soul, and source, which is your powerhouse, the source of life, the source of energy is your vagina, like you said. I love that you call it a cookie. That's great. It's like, yep, everybody wants to eat a cookie. No, that went there. Nope, that's where my head went though. Yeah, and it's really that connection, because in like the metaphysical world, they always talk about the mind, body, soul connection. Like they literally keep they keep out your source, your vagina, and that's why it's like the diamond status, because it's shaped like a diamond, and the way I envision it in my head. And this part of us is just cut off, and from an energetical healer perspective, right? What happens is we just disconnect from that part of our body, and this part is our feminine, right? This is our creative energy. This is how we create things in the world, how we bring things to fruition. It's our deepest connection to who we are. And so when we do that, it's just up there. And so a lot of the work, the energetic work that I do, because trauma, like you said, we can talk about it and, hash it out, but energetically, it's really rooted in our body. Right. I don't know if you connect to that, but so yeah, what I do is really clearing it from your body energetically, because so much of what we deal with, we're not even aware that we're going through it, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you were with your dad and he was an alcoholic, I'm sure there was a lot of physical stuff, but a lot of this stuff is also subconscious programming from what you've seen and what you were around, and you can't put that into words, right? Yes, we can talk about it because we can't explain that. But we feel it and our body holds on to it. And then our body is used to this vibration. And then we're attracting from that place, right? This is what we're bringing in. And that's really hard sometimes to say in words. Like, I don't know why I'm dating these men, right? Like, why are they so attracted to me? Well, that's because that's the vibe you're putting out there. And it's not because you're wrong. It's because that's all you know, right? And that's a huge thing. We have this constant blame and shame. Like, what's wrong with me? I'm broken. Why am I attracting these people? Where it's not that you are wrong or broken. It's you're putting this vibe out that's what you've known your whole life. And so that's what we're bringing back to us. And so I think it's amazing that you were able to see that and be aware of it and not hate God. I think a lot of women that are shamed in the church and with religion, they tend to shy away from God. But again, like, that's a big spiritual part of who we are.
Yeah, for sure.
As spiritual beings. And we don't want that resentment either.
Yeah, because that's another thing that we're holding on to and all that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yes,
So
yes.
it's amazing how you're saying, like, how it's manifesting in the body. And if we don't heal it and don't take care of it, it shows up in all these different ways. And
Hmm.
so, what if we didn't need a dumpster fire to wake up, right? I mean, I feel like that's
Exactly.
so.
Like, how much better would life be? Like, we wouldn't be charred. You know what I mean? Like, burnt all the time. It would be like, oh, red flag, I'm going to get out of this. Yes. And I think that's beautiful. No matter what we experience, our thoughts, feelings, and our emotions are huge to process and work through. Because if not, they will find a way. They
Yeah.
will find a way to manifest. And that is usually physically. So if we feel like ass all the time, and the doctors are like, oh, nothing's wrong, that's a huge indicator that we need to sit down and we need to sit in it and we need to really like, okay, it's time to start listening and stop
Mhm.
deflecting. Yes. And I love energy work for that too, for those of us that are like, I don't even know where to start, I don't have the words. Like, it's great, you don't need it, because God knows already, and we'll do the work, and we'll start where God meets us where we're at. And
Yeah.
if we don't have the words, but we have a heart that we're ready to start moving forward, that's the beauty of it. So that's why I love energy work as well. So I love all of this.
Me too. So, if our listeners want to find you, where can they find you? Where can they learn more about you and the cookie? I love that.
Yes. So just Coach Nilzara, that's my handle for my website, for Instagram, for Facebook. And also, I have recently taken over a group called Women Manifesting Intimacy by Melissa Keenan. And so if you are looking, for a deeper connection and just kind of having a group of women that are kind of in this conversation, that is also a group that they can connect with me in as well on Facebook.
Oh, that sounds amazing. I'm going to
Yeah.
check it out. Well, thank
Yeah.
you so much for being here. I feel like this conversation was really enlightening for a lot of listeners and also empowering, because it's amazing to see the journey you've been through and where you are right now. I think it's incredible. Like, how amazing of you
I
to
love
be
it.
here, to have a baby, to have a happy relationship. It shows people it's possible, it's available if they choose it. And that is just the best. So thank
Yeah.
you. I'm so grateful for you for being here.
Yes, thank you for having me. And this is super divine, and I'm excited.
Okay, and I hope to have you back on soon and we can have some IVF conversations. I'm excited for that.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If this was a contribution to you, please share, like, love, and comment. I would love to hear from you more, and make sure to follow us on Morph Healing. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and remember, you are here for a reason. I see you. Love, more.